I'm Dermot Murnaghan. Tonight's big story, sensational trials of the victims who fought back. Good evening from outside the Manassas Courthouse near Washington, D.C. Here, Lorena Bobbitt is on trial for a savage knife attack on her husband. The gruesome details have been making headlines around the world. And over in Los Angeles, a second trial of two boys who killed their parents is gripping America too. But behind these sensational court dramas lies a very serious issue. Does a history of abuse give victims the right to strike back? Well, here in America and in Britain too, more and more people are saying yes, to the horror of others who see a new form of vigilante justice looming. Shortly, the jury will be going out in the Lorena Bobbitt case, but already she's the new folk heroine of American feminism.
She finally said no more, and there are thousands, millions of women who tolerate this from their husbands and feel they have no alternative. And she was just at the breaking point and said, this is it.
But the feminist onslaught is scaring some men.
The frightening thing to me is that it'll raise the crime. There will be copycat crimes. I know 10 years ago in Thailand something like this happened, and emasculation has been of epidemic proportions. And in South America it's not an uncommon thing where she happens to be from. And if that becomes a part of our culture, it will be very frightening.
Manassas is the unlikely birthplace of a new women's movement. It's a conservative little town where, normally, very little happens. But suddenly it's full of the world's media. Events here are beamed daily to millions round the world. In the US, live coverage of the case is more popular than many afternoon soaps, and it's not hard to understand the interest. Lorena Bobbitt has been accused of cutting off her husband's penis. Oddly, for a woman facing up to 20 years in prison, she's been posing for glamour pictures in magazines and appears regularly as a TV guest.
I didn't want to be hurt by him again.
Bobbitt mania has swept the US. There's even a new word in the American language, to bobbit.
This has been a real good seller. Is abuse it and you lose it. And also this one is Love Hurts.
Just looking at them, every single one of them is pro-Lorena, anti-John. So there's a lot of sympathy for her and none for him.
No, we go both ways. What we've been doing is we've been putting up a different set up every day. There's
so
differences.
Today's pro-Lorena Day?
No, there's some on here for John as well, but there's some for Lorena.
But behind the commercialization lies a sad story. Lorena and John Bobbitt were married for 4 years. According to Lorena, 4 years of abuse.
He kicked me in my stomach and he threw me to the wall.
Was he kicking like this?
No, he was
like this.
It was like a side karate kick. And he went straight through to my stomach.
She would cry to me and tell me that he was hurting her. I saw bruises on her arms and on her head, and she used to be really shy and timid and come in with her head down. And she asked me if all men were like that.
This is the flat where the alleged beatings took place on a regular basis.
He beat me up there. He also raped me there.
One day Bobbitt came home drunk and she claims raped her again. Driven beyond endurance, she says, she picked up a knife and carried out her violent attack.
I was laying on my back and I was in a deep sleep. I just sprung up like I wanted to, scream, but there was nothing there. I was bleeding, and she just...
What did you feel, sir?
Pain.
Bobbitt rushed to a nearby hospital. He'd lost a third of his blood supply by the time he got there.
He then walked in under his own power with no fuss, no hysterics at all, walked in the emergency room, actually saw somebody he knew on the stretcher and was chatting with them while there was blood pouring down onto the floor.
Retrieving what his wife had cut off, doctors performed a remarkable operation. It took nearly 9 hours to restore the damage.
He's never expressed horror. He's never expressed a lot of violence towards his wife for having done this. The other thing that's really amazed me is he's been able to have a sense of humor about it, which to me is pretty extraordinary.
Bobbitt even poses in the joke T-shirts. This strange case has divided the US into those who are for Lorena and those who are for John.
I know what she did was horrible, it was wrong. Both of them, whatever they did. But I guess she's just so hurt now that she just can't take any more of it.
We're talking about someone who, even if we assume that everything she says is true, was acting not in self-defense, but basically in revenge. And even if you've been horribly abused, I don't think that gives anyone the right to mutilate another person.
In my opinion, maybe the reason why a lot of women are supporting Lorena is because she is maybe the first person who has really stood up. Here's a woman who supposedly has been battered and beaten up and raped, and she did something about it.
Despite his injury, it was John Bobbitt who was prosecuted first. Last November, he was tried for marital sexual assault. The jury sympathised with him and he was acquitted.
Oh, I just want to say I'm relieved that this is all over, and I'm thankful for the jury, and they believed me, and I just want to get on with my life, and because I got a lot of healing to do and start my life over again.
Would you accept that?
In the last 2 weeks, it's been Lorena's turn in the dock. She doesn't deny attacking her husband, but her legal defence is that it was an uncontrollable impulse, resulting from temporary insanity caused by his violence towards her.
Depression. She felt trapped in this marriage, but she felt like she could not escape.
For Lorena, ladies and gentlemen, this last offense of sexual violence was more than she could endure. In the end, ladies and gentlemen, what we have is Lorena Bobbitt's life juxtaposed against John Wayne Bobbitt's penis.
Rarely does anyone do something that sort of symbolically captures so much of the spirit of the times, and that Lorena Bobbitt has sort of become this heroine because there is so much sort of resentment and fury that goes on in our conversations about relations between the sexes that are essentially not openly expressed.
Retribution basically perpetuates the cycle of violence. And if we say, well, men have been violent toward women for a long time, so therefore that now gives women the right to be violent toward men, I think that's the worst possible thing we can do.
It's not a one-sided thing, and so if we have women start striking back out any time, sure, there's going to be a lot of reasons to be worried at night.
This headline-catching case comes as many Western nations are reviewing their attitudes towards women who attack their abusers. Courts are showing increasing lenience, campaigns are being launched, and the public is changing its opinions.
I think more women should do it, actually. It might teach some of them a lesson.
I can imagine doing the same myself quite easily, yeah. I don't know that I'd actually do it though.
I understand he was quite out of order to her, but I don't think he deserved to have his, his manhood taken away from him, you see.
I can see that there would be a time when that would seem like the right thing to do, yeah.
Do you think women should take the law in their own hands?
Yes, yeah, definitely, mate, definitely.
I don't see how she did it without the chopping board.
Britain had its own Bobbitt this week. Felicity Greenham nearly ripped off the testicles of her estranged husband in a violent argument. She was charged with grievous bodily harm and appeared at Liverpool Crown Court on Tuesday.
A great tall policeman arrived at the door, came into the house, cautioned me, which was just a complete shock. I was just completely devastated. It was quite evident that I could be imprisoned. It was taken incredibly seriously by the police. It went through my head when I was in the cells that these were men that had actually looked at this injury and quite obviously had felt it.
She is certainly not the typical mild female that society has probably perceived her to be.
Felicity said her husband attacked her, which he denied. She pleaded self-defense and was acquitted.
I feel extremely upset and disappointed at the not guilty verdict in this case. I feel as if I am the innocent victim of a particularly nasty and aggressive sexual attack.
If the situation had been reversed and it had been your husband inflicting similar injuries on you, do you think the verdict would have been the same?
I can't really comment on that. If my husband had inflicted similar injuries on me, I would never have taken it to a prosecution. I would never have done that.
What would the court say if I was to attack her? They'd say I was a wife beater or a woman beater, and how would society look on me then? I would probably be put in prison now. And it's so unfair that women can get away with vicious acts because they are just women.
She's made you like this, hasn't she? With her lies!
No! I hate you!
Do what you're told!
This is the controversial scene from the TV soap Brookside, where a violent husband is finally killed.
We don't know what it's like to live under that amount of terror. I found it very hard even playing the part to imagine what it must be like for somebody who can bring themselves to do that and actually then live with it.
Murder is murder at the end of the day, but a woman in a desperate situation, it's understandable that she will do what a mother will do to protect herself and her family. I wholeheartedly support ALA.
This week, the Brookside actors backed the launch of a new campaign against domestic violence. The right of victims to strike back is increasingly talked about. And in America, it's extended from abused women to abused children. America's other courtroom drama is the case of Lyle and Eric Menendez. In 1989, their parents were brutally murdered in their home in Beverly Hills, and the boys inherited $14 million. Nearly 4 years later, they finally admitted the killings, but claimed they were justified by a lifetime of sexual abuse. To many people's astonishment, it looks like they might get away with it.
Millions of Americans watched this trial. I mean, we're just captivated by it.
It has totally riveted this nation. I've never seen anything like this in my life.
Hollywood, Sunday, August the 20th, 1989. A multi-millionaire movie mogul and his wife are peacefully watching television and eating ice cream at their $4 million mansion in Beverly Hills. That night, Jose and Kitty Menendez were shot dead in cold blood. Immediately after the killings, the mourning brothers went on a $700,000 spending spree with their inheritance. It was said the killings were a mafia hit, and it stayed that way until Eric Menendez cracked during a session with his therapist.
He leaned back against, as I recall, a parking meter that was in front of the office door and said, we did it. I don't know if he said we killed our parents, but I asked him, you mean you killed your parents? He said yes.
The therapist's account and a tape he'd made of the confession had only been allowed as evidence after months of pre-trial arguments. It seemed to seal the Menendez brothers' fate.
The plan to kill the parents actually began in a situation where Eric was watching a BBC television show or movie, I'm not sure which it was, that had to do with the theme of the person in the film killing their father. The reason that the mother was included in the plan was basically that they couldn't find a way not to include her in the plan.
A week before the trial was due to start, the boys finally confessed openly to the police. But they came up with a reason. Their father, they said, had sexually abused them since they were children. The court heard a traumatic account. First, Lyle.
We would be in the bathroom, and he would put me on my knees, and he would guide me.
At some point, did he do some other things to you?
It became a highly emotional appearance. But was it performance or true recollection of horror?
Yes. My dad.
Eric showed similar emotion in response to his lawyer's question of what had first motivated the brothers to kill their father.
My dad.
Wait 1 second, Mr. Hernandez. Okay, let me ask
No,
you.
he was in the process of answering, so there's no need to ask him.
Can you answer the question?
Yes.
Okay, it was you telling Lyle what?
My dad had been molesting me.
All I can tell you is that if Eric was lying on the stand about the abuse, he deserves an Academy Award. He's the best actor I've ever seen. He really showed all of the classic profile signs of an abused kid in his testimony, and not only in terms of what he said and his knowledge of details, intimate details, but also sort of his attitude about his brother, his attitude about his father, this sense he had that his father was all-powerful. He really fit a classic profile of the abused child.
But skeptics wondered why it hadn't all come out when Eric first confessed to the murder.
They never mentioned sexual abuse to their own therapist, Dr. Oziel. They never mentioned it to their lawyers, and it didn't surface until they were in jail for approximately a year.
The boys' credibility wasn't helped by the playing in court of a tape recording of their apparent grief when they'd originally reported the shooting to the police.
What's the problem? What's the problem? What's the problem?
Someone killed my parents.
Pardon me?
Someone killed my parents.
What? Who? Are they still there?
Yes.
The people...
No.
Who
was the person that was shot?
My mom and my dad.
Your mom and dad?
My mom and my dad.
Okay, hold on a second.
When you think back to the emergency call to the police, which is one of the most extraordinary performances that I have ever heard, that so utterly convinced everyone with their crying and their screaming and their thing, my parents are dead, all this. The fact is, an hour and 10 minutes earlier, they're the ones who killed them.
The emotion that you heard in that 911 call could have either been the fabricated acting of two brilliant psychopaths, or it could have been real emotion they were actually experiencing having just killed their parents.
4 years later, the brothers claimed they'd been afraid their father would kill them because they'd threatened to expose his abuse. Against what seemed overwhelming odds, this allowed their lawyers to come up with a defense.
If they could show the jury that they were motivated by fear of their parents hurting them at the time they planned the killing, then they'd only be convicted of voluntary manslaughter.
I just don't buy this. I'm sorry, I don't buy this. The fact is, of this there is no doubt whatsoever. They shot and they killed their mother and father. And there were 16 rounds of ammunition shot. They went to San Diego 2 days before the murder to buy the guns that they used to kill their parents.
There were two separate juries for the two brothers. In Eric's case, the jury, divided over the brother's story, has ended up deadlocked.
A mistrial has been declared vis-a-vis Eric, the younger brother. Not only does it represent at least a very temporary and substantial victory for the defense team representing him, but you can bet your bottom dollar that other lawyers around the country will now be copying that defense.
This week, the jury in Lyle Menendez's case was due to deliver its verdict. The LA earthquake has delayed the final outcome, but most observers believe that neither brother will ever be convicted of murder.
Many of us have come from abusive households, and the great majority of abusive children would be given a green light signal by this case, or by that kind of a message to go out and do so. Indeed, no less a social philosopher than Roseanne Barr is in the current issue of Vanity Fair magazine encouraging the children of the United States to go out and kill their abusive parents.
The main similarity between the Bobbitt case and the Menendez case is this idea, which is a very prevalent idea right now, of the sort of abdication of responsibility. We have all sorts of cases where people are saying, I was a victim, and who knows whether the Menendez brothers were or weren't, who knows whether Lorena Bobbitt was or wasn't, but this idea is being presented as, if you were the victim of a certain kind of violence, then you are off the hook, essentially. This is sort of the modern day version of, you know, the insanity plea.
I find this whole pattern of forgiveness for murder such a dangerous thing that is happening in our country, that no matter what you do, you cut off a man's penis, you blow your parents away, no matter what you do, you say, I was abused, I was abused.
Back in Britain, campaigns on behalf of victims of abuse who strike back are also affecting attitudes in the courts, but some women say this sympathy can go too far. Peggy Smith is one of many who doesn't sympathise with the demands for more tolerant treatment. She can never forget the day in 1992 when she discovered her son had been killed by his wife.
It's still here, it's still eaten away. I don't lose it. I have nightmares over it sometimes. It's what she did to him. It's bad enough you kill somebody, but to do all those other things afterwards is cruel.
The body of Peggy's son Michael was found under the patio of his home in Walsall. His wife Jill had smashed him unconscious with a cast iron pan, throttled him with a clothesline and then buried him. She reported him missing, married again, and lived on in the same house until she confessed more than 2 years later. Jill Stubbs said she'd snapped after 10 years of marital violence and abuse. The victim's mother is far from sure of that.
Anybody can walk away from things like that. There's refuge. Why they've set all this sort of thing up now in these days for refugees, for women to be able to go. Why didn't she do that? Why didn't she go away and say, well, I'm so frightened of him that I can't stay with him? I don't think so. I don't think she was ever frightened of Michael.
Jill Stubbs was jailed for 2.5 years for manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility. The court accepted she was a victim of domestic violence.
I think one life is worth more than 2.5 years. It's not the damage you do when you kill somebody, it's the damage you do to other people, isn't it? The mother, his children when they grow up. They're going to want to know what happened to their father.
Karen Tyler thought her only way out was to kill her father. But now she begs others to realise that killing is never an answer. Tonight she talks about it for the first time. Her drunken father had subjected her to a lifetime of violence and abuse. One night in 1984 she cracked. She was found guilty of manslaughter and sentenced to 4 years youth custody.
He started to slap me and punch me in the corner, and I just run out of the room with my mum shouting, Karen, just go, run, go, because he was in such a raging temper, and for some unknown reason I picked the knife up off the kitchen sink and I got to the front door, and as I got to the front door he tried pulling me back. So I was on the doorstep. We had a little barney outside and I was on the doorstep. And it ended up that it just ended up that the knife went in, and it was horrible. It was really horrible, and I wouldn't wish that on any. I can still feel that going in now. It's really horrible.
For Karen, her desperate act has not, in fact, brought real release.
Because not only did I suffer for years before, I've got to suffer now for the rest of my life. It's still going to eat away at me no matter what. What I've done, I killed my dad, I killed my sister's dad and my brother's dad. It's still going to eat away at me for the rest of my life.
Karen was released within 8 months after a major campaign in her support. She urges victims of abuse to seek help, not violent revenge.
The advice I'd give to other people, men and women, is no matter how much suffering or torment you go through, there's always someone there for you to turn to. Try not, don't get yourself in any bad situation that you're going to be the one that's going to suffer for the rest of your life. To me, it just happened, and no matter how much torment he put me through, no matter how much aggression he showed towards me, I still love him. He was my dad. Nothing's going to ever change that. He could have been the He could have been a Jekyll and Hyde or anything, but I'd still love him because he was my dad.